Let's continue with the consumer behavior aspect of market sensing. Specifically, in this lesson, we'll look at the influences on the purchase decision process. Last lesson, we talked about the consumer decision-making process being problem recognition, information search, evaluation of alternatives, purchase, and post-purchase evaluation. You can find a nice summary of these stages at this website, and also at this website you can find a summary of the influences we're going to be discussing. Wouldn't it be nice if we could put consumers in a room alone and watch them go through this process? Unfortunately for marketers, consumers go through this process in a complex world with a variety of external influences. We can group those external influences as situational, psychological, and sociocultural influences. Let's take a look at these three categories of external influences on the consumer decision-making process one by one. First of all, situational influences. What are the physical surroundings like that the consumer is in when they're purchasing a product or considering purchase? For example, look at how McDonald's has changed its physical surroundings from being a playground in primary colors to a more cafe, Starbucks competitive sort of product. Big change in the physical surroundings there. Some people will choose not to shop at Walmart simply because they do not like the physical surroundings there. Another major situational influence is social surroundings. What about the salespeople at a particular store? Have you ever shopped at a particular store because you liked the salesperson there, or did not shop at a store because you didn't like the people who were in that particular setting? Another situational influence is time. How much time the consumer has to go through researching that process, and also what time of the day, week, or year it is. For example, certain products sell very well in the second week of February because of Valentine's Day. Chocolates, lingerie, flowers, teddy bears, all related to a situational influence. Another situational influence is the reason for purchase. Are you buying it for yourself? Are you buying it for a gift? If it is a gift, how important is the person you're buying it for? Is there any risk involved in your purchase if you make a wrong purchase? Another situational influence is the mood of the shopper. Some shoppers will buy more or less depending upon their mood and whether or not they like to shop. In addition to situational influences, there are a number of psychological influences on consumers as they go through this buying process. First of all, perception. Perception is our process of selecting all the signals and information that are going on outside of us. We can't possibly interpret everything that's happening in our marketing environment. So we select and then organize that information we select and interpret that information. That process is the process of perception, and we'll discuss that more. Another psychological influence is motives or motivation. What's the internal force that affects our behavior? What was the motivation for you looking or listening at this particular lecture? My guess is it was an assignment, or you didn't understand a particular topic, or you're trying to prepare for a quiz or a test. I'm guessing that most of you aren't listening to this particular lesson just because you want to. There's probably some other driving force. Other psychological influences are learning, attitudes, personality and self-concept, and lifestyles. And we'll look at those last four and define them later. Let's first take a closer look at the first one, perception. I mentioned earlier that we can't possibly perceive everything that's going on in our environment. So we have a tendency to practice what's called selective perception. Since we can't see everything, we see what we think is important or what currently supports our points of view. For example, in this FedEx logo, which I think you've seen many, many times, how many of you see the arrow regularly? Or do you never process that? Are you saying, what arrow? This arrow right here. My guess is now that the arrow's been pointed out to you, every time you will see the FedEx logo, you will now notice it, when previously you didn't. What about this image? What do you see? Do you see a young lady or an old woman? If you're seeing a young lady, this is her hat, this is her hair with her hat. Here's her eyes, her nose, her ear, the bottom of her chin on the right side, her chin, her necklace, and her fur. If you're seeing an older lady, this is her hair, this is her bonnet, this is her nose, this is the bottom of her nose, what was the other person's necklace is now her mouth, what was the other person's neckline is her chin, and again, this is her fur. So it's interesting that sometimes we see what we want to see or hear what we want to hear. And so if you have a particular perception about a product or service, even if a marketer tells you otherwise, you don't perceive it that way, because we all tend to hear things that we hear to support our personal beliefs and perceptions. That's why we'll talk later about how we can go about changing people's attitudes and perception as marketers. So we practice selective perception because we can't possibly perceive everything that's going on in our environment. And we tend to hear things that support our own beliefs and not hear or pay attention to or listen to things that don't support our own. And this affects marketers when they're trying to convince you to buy their products or services. Let's talk next a little bit about motivation. There's a website for reference there. Probably one of the most well-recognized theories of motivation is based upon Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. He says that people are motivated by different things at different times, and so we can't motivate all people by the same techniques. He says that the most basic level of need is physiological. Note that's not psychological, but the beginning is like physical. So physiological needs are our most basic needs. Those are needs for food, water, shelter, basic clothing. Once our physical needs have been met, they no longer serve to motivate us. And we then move to a higher level of need for motivation, and that is for safety. Once we feel our physical needs met and we're safe, we will then reach out to try to connect with other people. So you can understand how someone who doesn't feel safe won't be reaching out to connect to other people. Next, after we've connected to other people, our needs, our feelings about ourselves, our self-esteem is our next need. And then at the very end, self-actualization, being all that we're created to be. So if you think about a college, for example, that is trying to market itself to a consumer, or perhaps to you, they might tell you that the reason to attend their college is so that you can better provide for your physical needs. They might also say that the reason to attend college is to provide job security or safety within your job. They might say that the reason to attend college is to meet other people and get connected with other people in your age. Another reason to attend college would be to feel good about yourself and your skills and abilities, your own self-esteem. And another reason to attend college, the highest level of need, would be to be all that you can be. So the question is, what motivates you to learn or to attend college? What level of need is there? We've discussed one product who might market itself at all different levels of needs, but we could also discuss products that are designed for each level. Obviously, most basic foods are designed to meet physiological needs, while security systems, funeral planning, insurance is designed to make safety needs. Events or places where you can meet other people are designed and marketed to meet your social needs. So again, motivation is a huge psychological influence on people as they go through the consumer decision-making process. Let's look at other psychological influences besides perception and motives. Let's think about learning. We learn through thinking or through behaviors. If we try a product several times and we really like it, we might become what is called brand loyalty. So brand loyalty is a learned behavior. On the flip side, we might try a product and not like it, and therefore we have learned that we don't like that particular product. One of the biggest challenges marketers face is people's attitudes toward a brand or an object, their individual evaluation of a brand or object. And a lot of that is based upon their perception. Some might say that when you're talking to consumers, perception is reality to them. In other words, if they perceive your brand that way, it is that way, whether it is or not, unless we can change their attitude or their perception. So let's look at some ways that we can change people's attitudes. One way would be to take a negative attribute and turn it into a positive one. Maybe a negative attribute might be that your local community college doesn't offer the ability to participate on collegiate athletic teams. We could take that negative attribute and say that if you attend that local community college, you're going to be focused on learning and activities that are curricular, that are going to help you get a job, and you wouldn't have those distractions, and you don't have to pay for the support of collegiate athletics when that's not really why you go to college. Another way to change attitudes is to capitalize on a positive attribute. Perhaps your college has a very positive attribute, like small class sizes, but maybe people don't realize how important that is. So what you could do would be to emphasize the importance of learning in an environment where your professors know your name and communicate and care about you. And all of a sudden, people realize the importance of that particular attribute. You might also add a new attribute. Maybe there's a major or a program that you hadn't previously offered that people are very interested in, and you might add that attribute. You might also change their beliefs about an existing attribute, similar to what we talked about before, turning a negative attribute into a positive one. But it doesn't even have to be a negative attribute. It might be an attribute that they just don't realize how important that attribute is. So what we've discussed here is the importance of consumers' attitudes on them going through that consumer decision-making process of problem recognition, information search, evaluation of alternatives, purchase and post-purchase behavior, and how we can affect their attitudes. Additionally, a person's personality, their consistent response to a situation. Some people might respond to a situation in one way, another in another way, and a lot of times people buy products that support their personality. They wouldn't be caught wearing a particular type of clothing or using a particular brand or drinking a particular beverage because it doesn't match their personality. And occasionally, people will buy a product or service to support an area of their personality that they think is weak. So even though it might appear that they very logically go through that purchase decision-making process, sometimes personality decisions have a huge influence on what they ultimately decide to buy, even if the evaluative criteria for their consideration set doesn't necessarily point to that particular product or service. And lastly, their lifestyle, how they spend their time, is a significant psychological influence. So we talked before about the importance of recognizing that people don't go through this decision-making process in isolation. There are situational influences, psychological influences, and now let's also discuss some sociocultural influences on the consumer decision-making process. What are some of those sociocultural influences? Well, first of all, their roles. For example, a mother who's also a spouse, who's also a student, who's also a friend, who's also a coworker, might decide where they're going to eat tonight based upon what role they're going to be playing tonight. Another major influence is family influences. We call the process by which how you learn to be a consumer socialization. And a lot of that process is just used and learned through your family as you grow up. For example, when you were growing up, if you went through the checkout line and it rang up $17.99 instead of $27.99, what did you observe your parents doing? Did they tell the clerk that it rang up wrong? Or were they quiet and walked outside and then celebrated their deal? That's an example of how you learn what to do as you grow up as a consumer and how you're socialized as consumers. Were you as a child taught to bargain at garage sales or to pay full price? All of those family influences affect how you go through that purchase decision-making process. Another major influence, a family influence on the consumer decision-making process, is your life cycle. As a young single, you spend most of your money on yourself and things you want until you have children. If you're a young couple, then all of a sudden your entertainment options change. Instead of going to a bar or a nightclub or a PG-R movie, you now might go to Chuck E. Cheese, a Disney movie, something like that. As you move into full nest, 1, 2, and 3, you spend a lot of money on lessons and cereals, orthodontic care. And then as you move into empty nests and older singles, again, what you buy changes based upon your family life cycle. Also, your family affects how you go about making those decisions. As you go through that purchase decision-making process, does the husband make most of the decisions for the family? Does the wife make most of the decisions? Are most of the decisions shared? Or does it depend upon product category? Where the wife might make most of the healthcare decisions, maybe the husband might make most of the the gardening types of decisions. So family decision processes are also an influence on that purchase decision. Reference groups and opinions leaders. Reference groups are people that you are either members of, so you might be a member of a particular class or a particular group of people at work or whatever that would influence your purchase. For example, if I went to school today and all the people in my department decided to go out to eat, even though I brought my lunch, I might follow the lead of my membership reference group and even eat at a restaurant I would not normally choose as part of my purchase decision process. Aspirational reference groups are groups that you want to be a part of and aren't currently, and sometimes will buy products used by people in those groups because we want to be like them. Disassociative reference groups are groups of people that you don't want to be a part of. And so if you see a particular product or service as used by a member of that group, you would not buy that particular group. Social class, whether you're in the upper class, middle class, or working class or lower class, might decide where you would go as part of your purchase decision process. While an upper class family might go on a European vacation, a middle class family might go on a Disney World vacation, and a working class family might go to a state park, just to illustrate how social class affects our purchase decisions. And lastly, we talked about this in a previous lecture, our culture and subculture affects our decision. I hope this has clearly illustrated to you how people go through the purchase decision-making process using routine problem-solving behavior or limited or extending problem-solving depending upon the level of importance of that product to them, and how there are situational, psychological, and social cultural influences on consumer behavior.